In front of the magnificent and characteristic towering building, the crowd was surging, and it was really lively. This is the most famous science and technology exhibition hall in China, which displays various domestic science and technology-related exhibits from ancient to modern times. The first floor of the exhibition hall mainly displays some major discoveries in the course of human scientific exploration. The things are relatively old, they are all ancient discoveries. Old antiques can be visited for free. The exhibition hall on the second floor mainly displays some of the more advanced appliances that are really related to technology and the future. You need to pay for tickets to enter and watch, and the ticket price is not low. Because of this, Ran Jiani specially invited her friends to visit the Science and Technology Museum during the holiday. 2 days ago, a friend of her dad gave her 2 tickets for the exhibition hall. With these 2 tickets, he can visit the second and third floors of the exhibition hall. Ran Jiani held the ticket and waited at the door for a few minutes, and finally saw a familiar figure in the crowd, beckoning and shouting joyfully, "And Ran, here and here." Hearing her shout, a thin girl paused at her feet, turned and walked towards her. The girl was wearing an old down jacket, her long black hair draped over her shoulders, and her thick bangs and clunky black framed glasses covered 1/3 of her face. The other 2/3 were covered by a mask, and it was because Ran Jiani knew her well, otherwise she would definitely not be able to bear it. "And Ran, you are here." Ran Jiani was taken aback when seeing the mask on Qi Anran's face. "Why do you wear a mask?" "I'm sick." Qi Anran coughed twice and responded in a dull tone, "Yet. I'm sorry, I didn't know that you were sick, and I asked you to come out to see the exhibition. Or, you can go back and rest, and we will see it next time." "No, I'm almost healed after taking the medicine. I was more interested in the things inside, so I just took this opportunity to take a look and go in." Ran Jiani looked at Qi Anran up and down, and made sure that she was in good spirits, and then heaved a sigh of relief. Yet, during the festive season, many people brought their families to visit the exhibition. The first floor had the most people, and there were relatively fewer people on the second and third floors who needed to buy tickets. Qi Anran followed Ran Jiani, and compared to her friend's enthusiasm, she seemed a little bit ungrateful. After going up to the third floor, his eyes always drifted towards the top of the stairs unconsciously. "And Ran, and Ran." Ran Jiani's yelling successfully pulled Qi Anran's wandering sanity back. "Ah, what's the matter?" Ran Jiani twisted her eyebrows. "I just wanted to ask you what's wrong. You are out of your mind. Is it because the cold hasn't healed? Is it too tired? Or go back?" Qi Anran opened his mouth, and just about to speak, suddenly there was a loud noise not far away. Yijin, Yijin, listen to me explain, I and him are really not what you think." The two followed the reputation and saw a beautifully dressed woman clutching a man's sleeve and coming out of the stairs not far away, her face is full of panic and regret. The man held by her should be more than 1.5 meters tall, wearing a straight military uniform, and should not be very old. However, his whole body and the 1 wheat and 1 star on his epaulets make people dare not be too young because of his youth. There was a slight contempt for him. A pair of sharp eagle eyes fly diagonally into the temples and soared eyebrows, faint and sharp, like a sharp knife, which may pierce the deadliest part of your body at any time. Qi Anran was taken aback after seeing the man's appearance, and his eyes narrowed slightly. This man? Huo Yijin never thought that he was just doing a small task, and he could run into a drama scene where his old man's fiancée carefully selected for him was in a large public with other men, giving himself a green hat. Originally, he had planned to do nothing but saw nothing, turned and left, and continued to perform his task. When the task is completed, go back and talk to the old man and his family about the dissolution of the marriage contract. After all, he and this woman have met both sides, and they are not familiar with each other, and the feelings are not even at all. If it were not for the old man in the family to make his own decision, he would not have an extra fiancé. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the marriage contract was terminated, saving a lot of trouble. Whoever thought, just when she was about to leave, this woman happened to look over, her face changed a lot, she jumped over, clutching her sleeve tightly. Huo Yijin's complexion darkened slightly, and her gaze at Hu Jiyi seemed to be looking at a dead object. Miss Hu, I am not familiar with you enough to call each other by name. You can call me Mr. Huo or General Huo. In addition, Miss Hu. A girl who actively pulls a man out of the public is afraid that it will not be good for your reputation. Hu Jiyi was frightened by Huo Yijin's cold eyes, she instinctively retracted her hand, and said tremblingly, Yi. Huo Yijin's face sank, and Hu Jiyi hurriedly changed her words, Huo, Mr. Huo, you have misunderstood, and I and Mr. He are not. Before Hu Jiyi had time to explain, He Yuxuan, who was behind her, couldn't hold back anymore, and stood up for the beauty. You are the so-called fiancé of Ji. You still have a fierce face, Ji. Your family uses strong authority to force Ji's family got married with your family and asked her to sacrifice her love to marry someone she doesn't love. She is pitiful enough, you don't even know how to cherish her. Huo Yijin frowned and turned to look at He Yuxuan, using strong authority to force her family to marry my family? That's what she told you. Isn't it? He Yuxuan flushed, filled with outrage. I know you Huo Jiaquan has a strong background, but so what? If you have a background, you can do whatever you want and force others to do what they don't want. Mr. He, I beg you to stop talking. Hu Jiyi didn't expect He Yuxuan to say these things. She rushed forward in shock and wanted to stop, but after all, she was a step late. Huo Yijin's eyes were slightly dazzling, and he had roughly guessed the key points. He glanced at Hu Jiyi in disgust, and sneered, since Miss Hu is so wronged, I will call my grandfather soon and let him remove this as soon as possible. Marriage. In addition, I also ask Ms. Hu and Ms. Hu's family to take the initiative to go to someone else's house next time to remember to tell them that you actually have a sweetheart, so that you don't have to make unnecessary misunderstandings like today. Take the initiative to go to your house? How is it possible? Obviously. He Yuxuan was stunned in place, with a face full of disbelief. Huo Yijin didn't bother to talk with these two people anymore, turned around and prepared to leave. Mr. Huo, don't leave, listen to me, ah. When Hu Jiyi saw Huo Yijin turn around, her face changed again, and she hurriedly stepped forward to hold him. Unexpectedly, just when he touched Huo Yijin's sleeve, he was thrown away severely. In a hurry, Hu Jiyi accidentally pulled the cufflinks on Huo Yijin's military uniform. The chubby button flew for a certain distance and then slammed on the ground, and then rolled to Qi Anran's heel and stopped at her feet. Qi Anran looked at the button under his feet, twisted his eyebrows, leaned over and picked it up. Originally intended to return the things to him if the person came over for a while, but his face suddenly changed after seeing the structure of the buttons. At the same time, Hu Jiyi, who was thrown away by Huo Yijin, stepped back a few steps high heels, stabilized her body, and wanted to jump over. Huo Yijin's face was already somber as the bottom of a pot at the moment, and before the woman pounced again, he shouted, "Throw them out for me." Before he could say anything, several guards who followed him quickly stepped forward to hold the two of them and walked out. Hu Jiyi and He Yuxuan changed their expressions. Hu Jiyi was spoiled by her family since she was a child and grew up spoiled by her family. She had never seen this battle before, and her complexion became pale, trembling and unable to speak. He Yuxuan was like an angry young man. While being framed and walking out, he shouted, "What are you doing? Why do you drive us out? What a great soldier! Can a soldier be so lawless? I'm going to sue you, I am going to sue you." The adjutant behind Huo Yijin watched this scene silently, and really felt that these two people were brain-stuffed, and apart from anything else, they were very good match in terms of character. Huo Yijin didn't bother to waste time with this kind of mental entanglement. "Hao Chen, you take a team up first." The adjutant was stunned for a moment, and quickly reacted, responding with yes and greeted a group of people on the fourth floor. Huo Yujin saw the team go upstairs, and then turned and walked in the direction where Qi Anran was. Miss. Huo Yujin stopped in front of Qi Anran, and then quickly reached out his hand, begging her for the cufflinks. Looking at the past from a distance is completely different from the feeling of close contact. The man in front of him is like an over-sharp knife. No one needs to do anything, just stand there and no one can ignore it. Ran Jiani, who was standing next to Qi Anran, felt that her hands and feet were soft when she only looked at it, her face was pale as paper, and her whole person was a little shaky. Compared with her, Qi Anran seemed calmer. She only glanced at Huo Yujin, but was not in a hurry to return the cufflinks, and asked endlessly, "I bought it myself." Huo Yujin frowned when the voice came through the mask with a bit of buzzing nasal sound. He should not have been able to pay attention to this kind of person who only has one side, but he replied with a ghostly reply, "It was given by someone else." Huo Yujin regretted the words, but what Qi Anran said next gave him no chance to regret. "That's it." Qi Anran's eyes flickered, and he flicked the cufflinks on his hand with his fingers, and then handed the cufflinks back to Huo Yujin. Public figures, it's better not to take other people's things casually. Cause unnecessary trouble. Huo Yujin's face changed slightly, and the already fierce eagle eyes suddenly narrowed, as if the eagle falcon hovering in the sky was staring at the prey, ready to dive down at any time, tearing the prey into pieces fiercely. Qi Anran completely ignored the coldness and defensiveness of his whole body, and calmly turned around and said to Ran Jiani, "It's getting late, let's go back." Ran Jiani woke up like a dream. She glanced at Huo Yujin tremblingly, and then quickly retracted her gaze, as if looking at him for a while, she would be stabbed by his gaze. "Okay, go back." Ran Jiani took the initiative to take Qi Anran's arm and walked out. Huo Yujin did not stop, standing still and silently looking at the back of the two, her eyes dark. As soon as Qi Anran walked on his front foot, a young man in a light green military uniform led another group of people on his back foot. The man saw Huo Yujin's eyes light up, and said anxiously, "General, how is it?" "Dr. He. I let Hao Chen go up and protect him first. Then we too." Ji Shennan noticed that her boss was looking down at a cufflink in his hand and was startled. If he glanced at the sleeve of Huo Yujin's right hand that was a little embarrassed because the cufflinks were torn off, his brows frowned. "General, isn't this cufflink in your hand the one given to you by Lieutenant General An Chen? Why did it fall?" "I just had a dispute with someone, and I accidentally dropped it," Huo Yujin said suddenly and threw the cufflink to Ji Shennan. "Find someone to study this thing." Ji Shennan caught the cufflinks in a hurry, looked up and down, and questioned his face, "Research this thing? Is there anything wrong with this thing? I think it's quite ordinary, isn't it just an ordinary cufflink? Just let you do it." "Yes." Huo Yujin took a deep glance and turned around on the fourth floor. Not to mention Ji Shennan, even he himself didn't know why he cared about this cufflink, let alone why he chose to trust a stranger he had never met. Reason tells him that he can't trust the girl so credulously, but there is always a voice in his heart that keeps telling him that the girl can be trusted. This cufflink has a problem. If you don't believe her, you will regret it sooner or later. On the other side, Ran Jiani walked out stiffly holding Qi Anran, and he was greatly relieved as soon as she walked out of the gate of the exhibition hall. While clutching the little heart that had finally calmed down, he happily said with Qi Anran, "Anran, did you see that? That man was so handsome just now." Seeing her look like this, Qi Anran's cold brows couldn't help but soften a bit, and joked in a low voice, who was so scared that he didn't even dare to lift his head, and almost kneeled on the ground without his feet. "People are interested." Ran Jiani blushed when she said, "I am not interested in him, but I just think the person is handsome just now. I've grown up so much, and I have never seen such a handsome person, compared to those stars on TV. They all look good." Especially wearing that uniform, it's the uniform temptation that idiots often say. Unfortunately, the aura of the soldiers is too scary, especially when the officials are older. I think those people just listened to that man. Command, his officer shouldn't be small, right? Chi Enran's eyes flickered and nodded, well, 1 wheat and 1 star, he is a major general. It turned out to be a general, he looks quite young. No wonder there are so many people around, and the aura is still so strong. I looked at it from a distance before, and when I stood in front of me, my legs were shaking, then it feels more terrifying than when I saw tigers in the zoo before. Chi Enran laughed, and secretly said that if the man knew that he had been compared with a beast, he didn't know what his expression would be. It's also fortunate that you were able to maintain your composure against the person in Enran, and you told him for a long time. If I had been scared by him, I would have turned my head and ran away. The smile on Chi Enran's face suddenly converged, turning his head and looking at the exhibition hall for the last time, his eyes drenched slightly. They are all people who have already died, so what else is there to be afraid of? She will not let go of those who have calculated her, betrayed her, and murdered her. On the IC operating table, the sound of the ticking instruments merged with the rapid breathing under the oxygen mask. Chi Enran tried to save herself, but she was completely paralyzed and couldn't move at all. She could only stare at the excessively dazzling shadowless lamp above her head. I kept playing back Chi Xinthung's distorted and crazy face. More than 10 minutes ago, I heard that a plumber in Country Y had a kidney transplant before. After waking up, he was like a different person. Not only was he self-taught. I drew many beautiful paintings, and finally became a respected artist. You said, if I put on your heart, your brain, which is known as the treasure of the country, and the experimental patents in your brain did all his memories become mine. Chi Xinthung said that he seemed to think of the bright future after he had changed his heart, and laughed happily, ha 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 ha, as long as one day passes. One day, everything you have will become mine. I will replace it. You become a respected researcher in science and technology, replace you as the darling of the research institute, and become a national treasure protected by the federal government. Everyone will protect me, love me, and praise me. Like you who have a mother and no dad, just it should be like a mouse in the stinky water ditch, staying in the disgusting stinky water ditch forever without seeing the sun. Soon, everything will return to the right path, soon. Chi Enran can endure Chi Xinthung's insult to herself, but can't endure Chi Xinthung's insult to her biological parents. At that time, there was a fire in her heart, but because she couldn't control her body on her own, she couldn't vent the resentment in her heart, and she became more angry and unwilling. This fire has continued to the present, and it has become more and more prosperous for a long time. At this moment, there was a sudden rush of footsteps outside the door, and then a group of men and women in white coats filed in. They all gathered at the operating table under Chi Enran and surrounded her heavily. These angels in white, who usually rescued the wounded, even took up the scalpel at this moment, preparing to harvest a living life. Chi Enran deliberately wanted to write down the faces of this group of people, but these people were wearing masks, and only their eyes could see clearly on the entire face. In addition, the effect of the anesthetic has begun to work slowly. Chi Enran's consciousness is getting more and more blurred, and he can vaguely hear the data and secrets of the doctors, but he can't tell whether this is reality or himself. The hallucinations of dying. The doctor close at hand slowly opened her chest with a scalpel. She was completely anesthetized at this time. Obviously she shouldn't feel anything, but felt a strong pull coming from her chest, making her unhappy. In the blurred vision, she seemed to see the doctor put his hand into her chest, and when he came out, his hand was full of blood, and in his palm was a beating heart, her heart. At that moment, the resentment in Chi Enran's heart rushed into his mind. Why did she finally get out of that disgusting place, but in the end she still died in the hands of Qi family? She hated Chi Xinthung, the Qi family, the decent doctors in front of her, and the colleague who stabbed her in the back and let these people in secretly. She raised her hand to her heart back, but her eyelids were slowly drooping as if they were too heavy. In a daze, Qi Enran seemed to hear the scream of Xue Tuan, and then the boundless darkness enveloped him. The lights in the operating room are off. Ah! The girl lying on the simple single bed opened her eyes quickly, and her empty eyes gradually adjusted to the darkness in the house after a short adjustment. Qi Enran slowly sat up from the bed, looked at the familiar but unfamiliar furnishings in the house, and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. A week ago, she woke up from her sleep and found that she had returned to the time when she had not moved out of Qi House 7 years ago. During the spring festival this year, she had a high fever the next day because she was locked out of the door by the Qi family all night, which lasted 3 days. And her nominal parents never hired a doctor for her from the beginning to the end. If she had not had some experience, she would have always kept 1 or 2 potions by her side, and she might have died of illness long ago. When Qi Enran woke up, the fever had just subsided, and he didn't have much strength. He finally got better after lying in bed for a day. From then on, she basically had the same dream every night, as if she was reminding herself not to forget the tragedy of the previous life, let alone repeat the mistakes of the previous life. Qi Enran was clutching the beating heart on her chest, telling herself over and over again that she was still alive, alive well. After finally calming down, I heard an impatient voice suddenly outside the door, Second miss, it's time to get up. The eldest lady and the young master are still waiting for breakfast for a while. You slept in bed like this again. Go down, madam should be upset again. Qi Enran's status in the Qi family is not high. Although she is named as the second miss of the Qi family, even the nanny dared to point her fingers around and drink, without putting her in the slightest. Listening to the ridicule and shouting of the people outside the door, Qi Enran's face sank slightly, but he still endured it and shouted at the door, I know, I'll get up right away. Then you can hurry up. The nanny Lu Ma turned around and left. Listening to the footsteps outside the door, Qi Enran lightly breathed a sigh of relief, got up and walked to the small mirror beside the bed, and lifted the heavy bangs on his forehead. A pale and thin face of melon seeds was reflected on the old mirror. Although it was a little sickly recovering from a serious illness, it could hardly conceal the outstanding features of his facial features. The slightly frowning brows and the tightly pursed red lips made people want to help her smooth the furrows of the brows and make her smile again. Of course, the most difficult thing to ignore is her eyes, slender and deep, like a deep pool, people knowing that they might be drowned in them but can't help but want to get closer. The only failure of this entire face is probably the bangs that Qi Enran raised up high, and after putting down the long bangs, it was able to cover most of her eyes. Qi Enran looked at the face in the mirror, a sharp light flashed across his eyes, took a pair of black-framed glasses on the side, and put down his bangs. The cumbersome glasses and thick bangs made the quiet and beautiful face just about to be ordinary and rustic. Qi Enran breathed a sigh of relief, simply tidied himself up, and turned around and left the room. When Qi Zhentheng's 2 siblings came downstairs, it was already an hour later. Qi Enran helped the nanny prepare breakfast and walked out of the kitchen. Placed in front of her were a few hard steamed buns and a small dish of chili pickles, while on the other side of the table were hot porridge and various refreshing side dishes. A table, cut from the middle, from left to right, seems to be separated by a gap. When Qi Enran rode his half-used bicycle to school, the class bell just rang. Qi Enran stepped on the dot and rushed into the classroom and slipped back to his seat through the back door. No one in the classroom raised their heads to look at her. In the last semester of high school, all the classes for the entire year were shrouded in a terrible depression, even if their school is recognized as a bad school. The only difference from the eugenic class is that the poor students' class like theirs has shown a trend of polarization early on. Those who don't want to take the college entrance examination simply don't even go to school in this last year. Only those who want to take the college entrance examination but can't raise their academic performance are left behind. In Chi Ran's class, 2/3 of the seats were empty, and only Onet heard, less than 20 people came. The first class of the school is math class, which is about the math test papers at the end of last semester. The math teacher in their class is a middle-aged, bald, fat old man, but he looks down upon these poor students as a teacher. Every time I talk to them, I feel like yin and yang, sarcastically implying that they don't do well if they don't do well, and waste resources. Chi Ran glanced at the red scores on the paper, a trace of his eyes flashed, but he didn't care much. In her previous college entrance examination, she was admitted to the Imperial Capital University with the first result in the province. She lived her life again, and she was unreasonably worse than her previous life. What is really important now is how to get rid of that family. She endured for more than 10 years in her previous life, and finally was able to make a blockbuster during the college entrance examination and test God Capital University. The family almost didn't drop their chin after knowing this, and even made up the calculation to let Chi Xintheng go to college instead of him. Chi Ran naturally couldn't do what they wanted, and in the end Chi Xintheng failed to enter the Imperial Capital University as expected. This is probably the reason why Chi Xintheng would resent herself so much later. She felt that she had robbed her of the glory that originally belonged to her, but she never thought that it was not something that belonged to her. Chi Ran could walk the old path of his previous life and leave that home through the college entrance examination, but this is not the best solution. In her previous life, she also learned a long time later that her biological mother left an inheritance before her death. As long as the Chi family can safely raise her to the age of 18, she will be able to receive this inheritance. During this period, if Chi Ran was abused by the Chi family, died due to other reasons, or left Chi family for more than half a year, the inheritance would be automatically donated to the charity organization. This is also the reason why the Chi family obviously hated her, but never thought of abandoning her or killing her directly. In her previous life, she thought she had given her a bite of food for so many years in the Chi family, and at that time she was busy working on an important research underneath. She didn't have time to spend with them, so she didn't pursue this matter. But in this life, she said that she didn't want to be cheap anymore. The insatiable family belonged to her mother's inheritance, and she would not give them a penny. There is still more than half a year before she becomes an adult at the age of 18. She has to find another way to leave the Chi family earlier. Chi Ran, Chi Ran. Chi Ran was thinking about how to leave Qi House when he suddenly heard someone calling his name. Subconsciously looking up to follow the reputation, I saw the middle-aged bald mathematics teacher in their class looking at her with a cold face, and said in a bad tone, "Chi Ran, why are you in a daze during class? Come and solve this problem." All the dozens of classmates in the classroom looked at her in an instant, except for Ran Jiani, who was sitting in the front row, showing concern. Others are either indifferent and irrelevant, or gloating with a little bit of malice. Chi Ran's grades were a drag even in their class, especially in mathematics, which he never passed. At this moment, what is on the blackboard is a function question to find the maximum value and minimum value. Such a question is used as a fatal problem in the back of the test paper to pull the scores of top students. The top students of those years are not necessarily able to do well, let alone Chi Ran's poorest students. Chi Ran glanced roughly at the question on the blackboard, and the answer to this question had spontaneously emerged in his mind. But in the eyes of other people, she just couldn't do it at all, and she was so frightened that she was at a loss. The math teacher thought so too, snorted coldly and mocked, "You people, it's just that the mud can't support the wall. Look at the students in the school next door, you can learn from others, and you can be their teacher. It's almost enough to repeat the question at most." When the math teacher said this, he pointed directly at the students in the classroom, and blurted out, "Look at you again. If you change the same topic a little bit, you will forget everything. It's all pig brains. I'm here. Have you worked so hard to tell you so much? Isn't one score lower than one after the test? I don't think you should stay in this classroom. Just stay at home, just like those little who absent from class all day. Don't it is a shame to come to the school and waste the teaching resources of the school. Even if you are admitted to the university, you will surely be no better than those hooligans in the future. It is all social rubbish, assholes. The faces of the students in the classroom were blue, but they really couldn't say anything to refute this person, because they did not have good grades and really couldn't compare with the top students. But just because they have poor grades, they must let this kind of people who ignore their efforts repeatedly insult and trample on their dignity? The few girls in the class with weaker mental qualities flushed their eyes when they heard the math teacher's words. The boys looked gloomy even though they didn't cry. When Chi Anran listened to the teacher's words that could be regarded as insulting, his eyes were also dazzling. Sitting in the front row, Zhou Yuqian had a calm face. Just as he was about to get up to start with the teacher, he was pressed back by Wen Ruheng, who had seen him through early on. Let go, this kind of teacher, look at me. Ancestor, I beg you, bear with me, just a few months of work, are you still going to be dropped out? No school in the whole F-city dare to accept you. Then quit school, don't read it. Zhou Yuqian threw Wen Ruheng's hand away from him, and was about to get up when a figure suddenly passed by his side. Zhou Yuqian was startled and looked at Chi Anran as he walked to the podium in surprise. The math teacher was also taken aback when Chi Anran came over. What are you doing? Without even looking at him, Chi Anran picked up the chalk and wrote on the blackboard. The clacking sound of chalk falling on the blackboard made the students with red eyes and bowed heads raised their heads again, and everyone was stunned because of this raising of their heads. The originally empty blackboard was filled with formulas they couldn't understand, densely packed and eye-catching. Everyone at the bottom. These problem-solving steps seemed so complicated, they didn't even understand a word.